So, welcome, boys and girls, to the first episode of this Coaching Counter-Strike podcast, and we'll be answering your questions that you've put on the comment sections of our previous videos. So, if you have any questions for the next episode, chuck them in the comments below, and we'll try to get to them. So, here with me today is the incredible Xertz, who I've been coaching recently. He plays for Mako in Australian MDL, and he's been around the Australian scene for a while. So very quickly, Xertz, why don't you give us a brief rundown of your background in CS and all that jazz?
Yeah, cheers. How are we? I'm obviously, Xertz, and I play in Australia, so it's a little bit different over here to the Europe and American scene, where it's a little bit smaller, but I've been around the Australian scene competitively for 12 or 13 years. Started in CSS when I was a lot younger. Worked my way up to, I think, CGP in my last season. And CGP here is like the professional scene for AU, is like the highest tier. So if I use CGP, that's what that means. And then went across to CSGO when it first came out. I didn't enjoy the game so much. And so I quit for a little bit there, rejoined, ended up playing again in CGP in Australia in 2014, I think, 14, 15, around there. And then I quit for 3 years. And now I've come back and I've joined the guys over at Mako recently. And pretty much, we're pretty much, again, playing back at CGP now and MDL in Australia, and, trying to push it as much as we can. So, yeah.
So when you first took a break from CSGO, was that like literally 2013 when the game was pretty much unplayable to an extent?
Or, took about a year off. Yeah, took a good year off. I think, at that stage, I can't remember how old I was actually. But at that stage, I found out what other things in life, finishing school and playing with, playing football over here and stuff like that. That sort of took priority. And so it was a good experience, but I obviously missed the game, so I came back to it.
All right, fair do. So we'll just dive straight into it, Mr. Xertz, with the questions. So the first question is all about mirrored spots. So I'll start off by explaining what mirrored spots actually means. So mirrored spots is where, when you're setting up a team, you have people playing the same spot on each side of the map. So if they're the B anchor on CT Mirage, they default to apps on the T side. And the whole idea is that you play both sides of the coin and you learn stuff faster. So the question is, why is this a good idea? And I think it should be fairly easy to understand this, that if you play both sides of that coin, you get to see the defaults, the takes of map control, all the nades, and you get to learn stuff so much faster. And I think particularly for newer players, it would help a lot if you do this with your team and you set it up so you are playing like this. And I think when you add something new on one side of the map, you very quickly understand how it works on the other side. And even you might even start thinking about counters and stuff, because you'll see when you die from how they're playing against yourself and stuff like this. So I think it's a really good idea for new teams. And actually for you, Xertz, I was thinking about this, and I'm pretty sure you don't play mirrored spots on any map right now, somehow, impressively. But at least from a perspective of a player, do you think it is a good idea for newer players to be doing this sort of thing, to be playing the same area on both sides of the map?
Yeah, well, for me personally, I sort of fit in. I'm definitely just fit in where I can and where it helps the team the most. So obviously, I'm just playing some uncomfortable spots for others where I'll put my hand up and I'll just take those sort of spots on all maps. So for me, I guess I'm a bit of a utility player in that sense, where I'll do whatever I can and play different spots. But I think it is good. It is good for when you're starting off, picking up tricks of the trade, seeing what other people are doing, finding out what's in meta. Obviously, meta is a big thing in CS, and that changes a lot. Whether teams, you will see. It used to be heavy execute a couple years ago, or even a year ago, and then I would say we're seeing a lot more pop plays now. Where as a pop play, I'll explain, is it's where you pretty much your entire team are going to one side of the map, and you're going off maybe one flashbang into a site, and your entire team is just going to be there, and you're rushing in. So I think it's good to find out what the meta is, and all in all, nade use and all that sort of jazz. Yeah, it's a good way to learn a spot. That's for sure.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing that I like to push all the time in content I make. Is that you should. I think for new teams, it is just such a good idea to playing this, and I think it complements having consistent site partners as well, quite well when you're playing opposite sides with the same people around you and stuff. And I think, again, especially for newer players, it's so good just to get the experience on both sides of the map with the same people rather than moving all over the place. This map you're anchoring on this side of the map and then you're like defaulting out mid on the other, and yeah, same with consistent site partners. So I don't know if you have any other comments on that one, Zertz, on that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess playing with your teammates, especially early on in the team when you're trying to build that chemistry. If none of you have played together in the past, then obviously, yeah, it would be a good thing to speed up comfortability. I personally don't think it's something that you should rely on heading in when you're going up the ranks or you're making it further, further up the ladders, so to speak. I think you need the ability to work with all five of your players, but that obviously comes over a fair period of time playing with one another, working out how aggressive one certain player is, what they like to do in certain situations, how they like to pick off flashes because they may want to. Certain players will use flashes differently. For instance, a player will like to actually take contact before you flash, and he'll jiggle and he'll take contact and then you'll flash. And other players will want to go off sound, like just sound cues and ask for a flash. So um, definitely getting to know all your players over. You want to be able to play with everyone in any spot, but right at the start, obviously learning and a brand new team, it can be rewarding very early. But I think don't rely on that, always.
Do you think it's much more important these days in CSGO to know how your teammates are playing versus when you first started playing 2012, 2013, when, perhaps people didn't understand exactly, how you play out situations and stuff, and maybe it was just a bit more kind of deathmatch, to be honest, back in that period of time?
100%. Especially in Australia, it was very puggy for as long as I can remember, all through Counter-Strike Source. Utility wasn't huge, and then even early CS:GO, utility was not used to the way and standard it is nowadays. I think the game has developed and grown exponentially, and the need for the knowledge of utility and how you can help your teammate out opposed to how you can get yourself kills has definitely changed now to what it used to be.
Okay, I think we've covered that topic, so we'll jump on to the next one. And this is all about breaking your players as a coach or in-game leader or just a member of the team in general. How do you break your players out of the mindset of playing scrims to win? And I think for teams at lower levels, this is actually a really big problem where they just go into scrims and it's do or die, and they want to win every single round, and especially they're getting angry at their teammates in scrims and stuff when they make mistakes rather than treating it as you should, like practice, where it doesn't matter so much. So, in your experience, how do you break out of this mindset? Is it a big deal to break out of this mindset? All of these sort of questions.
It's hard. It's a hard thing to do, because obviously everyone wants to win, and you want to win as many rounds as possible. But as most teams probably do, and especially at the higher levels, you'll play a full 30 rounds regardless. So it may be a 22-8 scoreline at the end of practice, your way or against you. But what you have to take into account is that practice is exactly what it's there for. So it's called practice for a reason, and that's just to work out what is working and what isn't working. So obviously, if you're losing 22-8 in scrims, there's something that isn't quite working, or that there is a reason you're losing the rounds. But you got to take that as a positive. Like, okay, we're doing this during practice. We're here to fix these mistakes, and hopefully, when we come into an official, that you can, you know, turn this around and get wins and help us win officials. So I think it's smoothing out your mistakes, breaking bad habits, using utility that you probably want to try a few different things, so a few different types of takes from different spots, and practice is really use it for timings and stuff like that as well. So it's something that lower level teams do get stuck in, where that mindset of that we have to win the scrim. But what the mindset the best way to break it is, in all honesty, going over it as a team, talking about it as a team, and having that understanding as a whole group of 5 or 6 with a coach, that tonight and every night that we go into practice, we're going to try out certain and specific things. And if it doesn't work, doesn't work. If it works, fantastic. We'll write that down. We'll keep it.
Yeah, I agree. It's certainly from like a coaching or like a leading perspective, definitely before the scrims, working out what you're going to practice. Of course, you normally have some sort of theory before where you'll talk through, okay, we're going to run these setups today. This is the new exec we're adding. And just before scrims or even during scrims as a coach, just reminding people we're here to practice this. If we struggled on this in our last official, we're going to do this to fix it. That's such a big part of breaking people out of this mindset where if you just play your standard game in scrims, if you play it like a match, you're not going to learn anything really, because, you know, even if you're 25-5ing a team every single time, running the same stuff, you're not learning anything. You have to practice the things you're not so good at or where the mistakes were. So I think definitely from a coaching perspective, that's a really big deal, is staying on top of that sort of thing. And I think in general, as players get more experience, they do just understand that scrims don't matter literally at all. The scrim results mean nothing. And you will also find that you'll lose a crap ton of scrims and then you'll actually play better in the officials. So yeah, I don't know if from a playing perspective, Kobe, coming into games, is it really good to have your leaders or maybe the team all talking about, we're going to run this, we're practicing this for this reason? Does that help you a lot with staying out of these bad mindsets and staying focused on what you need to practice?
Sure. When you know that you're going into a scrim or something and you are specifically trying just these 1, 2, 3 different things, it definitely does help. Yeah, for sure. It helps you just understand, in an official, you definitely see, different holes where you could counter things or stuff like that. But if you know that you're going into scrims and you know that you're just practicing certain things, yeah, it's so much easier to not get tilted or it just understand what's going on and the reason why you're running these certain things. Because of course, an official, you might do a counter to certain plays, but if you know you're just there to practice it, then it's more working out timings and you're working out what works against that strat as well. What things are a counter to your strat and how you might be able to see it coming in an official. So a certain smoke that gets thrown against you in practice that completely ruins that strategy. You may see that come out early on in an official and go, oh, this is, they're going to be playing 2 or 3 here, but possibly. And, that will then allow you to cancel it or restructure that strategy where one use of a flashbang may then win you the round instead of just running headfirst into 2 or 3 people.
Have you found that there's a big contrast in how scrims feel over the years that you've played, or potentially when you've played in lower level teams versus now, where maybe before people were just playing it to win and it was basically like maybe even a souped up 10-man basically with scrims, whereas now it's more structured perhaps?
For sure. Yeah, 100%. It's definitely more structured now. You can tell a lot of teams are trying different things and running different things. Obviously, there still are teams out there that you do verse today that seem very puggy. But, that may be their frame of mind that night. It may just be the way that they play Counter-Strike, which may be a very puggy style, which works for them. But definitely nowadays, you see a lot more full-blown executes, great timings. Everyone is so much more aware of flashbangs. So everyone's, you're seeing people's routing where they're playing anti-flash against you, and you may think that that's a perfect flash, and you end up, swinging into 2 people that are completely unblind. That happens a lot more nowadays than it used to. Yeah, I think the game has evolved so much. It's actually it's fun to play now. I have a lot more fun playing now than I think I did back when it was more of a pug.
Have you watched any like early days CS:GO recently, like pro level? Because I watched some of the major games from DreamHack Winter 2013. And for those that don't know, that was the first major we had with the £250,000 prize pool, dollar even. prize pool. Fnatic won that. They beat NIP in the final. But I was watching those games. I was like, this has to be a joke. Like, these guys would lose to bottom end, tier 6, tier 7 teams these days. So I don't know if you've actually watched it, but the difference is unbelievable.
Watching some of the
then.
highlights. Watching some of the highlights, yeah. I remember when FACER came to Australia, and I actually was playing in that. I think I was playing in like possibly the first game of it when it came to Australia. And this is when like no one around the world knew of anything about Australian CS. And so this is and again when CS:GO lounges around, and so that's how far back it is. That we had like 70,000 people tuning in, and so I went back and watched the VOD of that the other day on FACEIT, and I just like it's just funny to watch. Like it is so different back then to what it is now, and how the game's played. Like it was on Dust 2, which is still a very, I guess, aim driven and can be a puggy map. But my god, it was pretty funny to watch.
Yeah, we've come a long way, thankfully. Anyway, we'll jump on to the next one. So this question is, as a new team, once you've done all the stuff outside the serve, you've chosen your spots, you've worked out who's on which site, who's going where on T side. Question is, like, when you actually start practicing the maps, what should you be practicing? Should you be really focusing on the defaults, the setups, the executes, whatever, all of these sort of smaller things? So in my opinion, for newer teams especially, playing standard is definitely the way you should go instead of trying lots of gimmicky stuff or, one-off set strats. I'd focus on the standard stuff, the taking the map control, the standard execute, making sure everyone knows the nades. That's such a big thing at the lower levels where they think that, like in late round executes, only 2 people have to know the smokes, but the whole team needs to know it for late round because you don't know what's going to happen. Anyone could have the utility. So it's very important to do all of the standard stuff like that. And particularly on the CT side, I think you can get away with playing fairly standard, at least in terms of your overall setups, up to a seriously high. Like, I'm not joking. You can get up to top 50 in the world playing standard CT sides as long as your comms are good and you rotate. So I think for newer teams, you play the standard stuff and you work on the comms, the rotates, and you get kind of the rough frame of mind down, the rough idea of what's going on, and then you add the more complicated stuff. You add the one-off execs, you start adding more complicated setups to counter certain stuff. But I think the only hiccup here for this sort of thing is that for less experienced people, what does standard even mean? And I think if you have an experienced coach or in-game leader, you'll be fine on this sort of stuff. But I think perhaps some people might have issues when they don't know what the standard is and they don't know what to run. So from your perspective, Kobe, what do you reckon? New team, should they be practicing the standard stuff? What is the standard stuff? Where would you start when you've got a new team? And I think this is more for lower levels than at high levels where people understand what's going on when they first come together.
Sure, totally agree. Definitely. It's CT side. I would say working out your generic setups and what to do in certain situations. Like for instance, Inferno. Let's play just towards top mid nice and early. So you play. Let's say you have a jungle player. You have in Australia we call it diggity, but it's called short. Is it in other
short
parts
lane
of the world?
porch. It's all good.
Yeah. So around there, and then you have your apartments player. And let's say we're going to we'll just hold, close dig, and we'll hold jungle nice and early. And then as soon as a jungle smoke comes in, let's either, molly and give it up, or, just completely give up mid. Understanding those certain things in a CT aspect. So again, keeping it as simple as possible. Not overthinking too many things. I think early on, you don't want to be, creating too many certain gimmicky setups where you're doing boosts and stuff like that. You just want to be able to get those basics down for CT side. But I think for T side, I do agree with obviously taking map control. That's obviously a big thing for just CS in general. Map control, from the lowest level to the highest level. If you're a brand new team coming in, I think you need to focus on map control, but keeping it simple. So I would personally say if you have a brand new team, I would be making a lot of pop plays. And the reason I say making a lot of pop plays, and again, like I explained earlier, a pop play is, going towards one side of the map with a whole group of players and going with one flashbang and going together. One, pop plays, it's in meta at the moment. A lot of pop plays. Two, it'll help your spacing as players, and spacing being, first guy goes in on the flash and having a second and a third player to trade with him. So you have your entry fragger go in, and he may either get the kill or he may just find where that player is playing, and he's able to get the kill himself or get the second or third player into that area of the map a kill. I think that's very beneficial to teams that are just starting off to use a lot of pop plays. And I think, that'll definitely help with your spacing, your trading, your understanding how your teammates work, and just playing as a team. And again, you're going to be getting map control from that, and you can go from that wherever you will. But I think pop plays early, for an early team,
Yeah, I agree. The pop plays, the contact plays, stuff like that. I think people get lost a lot in, they see all these incredible executes with all these incredible timings, and those are the ones that people do the videos on YouTube or whatever. I'm a culprit of that as well, because it just makes for better content when you have loads of great nade lineups and stuff. But just playing simple with popping onto sites, contact plays as well, they're great. And as you say, definitely for trading and stuff, this will help that get better so quickly, rather than trying to do really intricate set stuff, playing more, not necessarily on the fly, but more explosive, more contact heavy and stuff. So one thing I think teams have problems with it happens at higher levels, but more so at lower levels, is when they try to add too much at once. They say, we're going to add all these setups, going to add all these executes, and then they go into the games, it's just a complete mess where nobody knows what's going on. And maybe they should have been playing more standard stuff first and sorting that out. So in your experiences, have you had this sort of thing where you've added too much when you should have just been focusing on the simpler stuff and getting that down first?
100%. Yeah. For sure. I even think the current team that I'm in, when I first joined, possibly, I was in game leading when I first joined the team, so they needed to pick up an IGL, and I joined as an IGL, and I think possibly I went for trying to go into too many executes and actually not working with pop plays enough. As much as I said it, I should come in and do that. But if I went back in time to when I first joined this side, it's probably one thing I would do is work more on our spacing and our pop plays and that sort of map control. And I think once you've got that down, then you can start layering certain things. And I guess this goes into different maps too. If you're playing a map like Mirage, a Dust 2, an Inferno, those sort of maps, you can really actually play it as a pug, because everyone's sort of got usually a broad understanding of playing those maps, because they're probably the three most played maps going around and have been for years. But I would say when you go into a certain map like Nuke or Train, I feel like you do need to get a little bit more down than just, okay, we're going to go into this map and we're just going to throw this and that's all. You need a bit more in depth. So I would say the advantage, if you were to do it, I would focus on the main easy maps to do. So your Inferno, your Dust 2, your Mirages, and just keep it basic. Keep going for those pop plays, and just keep it nice and simplified.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. This is again for newer teams. I got asked, is there an advantage to starting on a particular map? When you're a new team, you're thinking, you got everything ready to go. Which map should we start on? Do you have any advice for these people? Is there a map you'd advise to start on, or do you think it doesn't really matter what they go for?
Like I said, I don't think. I think you want to try and you want to play what's comfortable for everyone. So if in our region, it's like I said, Inferno, Mirage, Dust 2. They're probably your three main maps. But I wouldn't specifically say practice on one map and one map only to start. I think you want to keep it broad. You want to find out what works for you guys as well. You may think Mirage is no good for you guys, but you'll end up working out Mirage actually can be a really strong map because of just how certain players have mixed and matched together. So I honestly don't think sticking to just one particular map early on is good. I think you just want to get in there and try everything out and see what works for you guys, and and then try and work out your map pool from there instead of trying to solidify a map pool that you don't even know if that's your best map, maybe your worst. But yeah.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I definitely think you just choose the maps you want to practice. I mean, you might want to bear in mind your map pool and stuff and what you want to play. So as an example, with one team I was coaching when we were getting ready to play get some fairly serious teams in the next season, we did pick our maps before we started. We already knew we were going to permaban Mirage because there were so many strong teams and we didn't think it was going to be worth our time practicing. So we did actually have a pretty set plan of what we were going to practice first, but that was totally dependent on we knew what competition we were up against. And I'm guessing actually in Australia, there must be some maps which teams don't play as much. So you could actually, in that sense, have an advantage. This isn't so much for lower levels. At higher levels, you could think in this sort of way where you actually plan your map pool ahead of time. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that one.
Well, yeah, in Australia, I would say a lot of teams try and steer clear of train at the higher levels, and even overpass isn't played too much. But the rest of it, and I guess Vertigo's now coming into it. Everyone's sort of dabbling their toes in that map now, which is good to see. I think I honestly really like the map. I think it's a good change up to the game and it's really good fun. But yeah, in Australia, it's they're probably the two to three main maps that everyone sort of steers clear of / doesn't play as much. But I think it's good to play every map. Obviously, our team at the moment, we don't play train. We that's really there's no secret about that.
Big leaks.
Yeah, but there's no secret about that. But we always instaban it. But I'm keen personally to hopefully get stuck into that in the next month or so and see how we go on it, because we've never played on it. Like literally, we've never even tried it with Zilla idealing. So it would be cool.
Yeah, I would say that if there was a scenario where in a perfect world where you could just choose one map to start on and everyone was fine on all the maps, I do think Inferno is a really good map to start on if there is a scenario where you have a lot of choice, because I just think Inferno is so much about the fundamentals and it's such a good map for understanding rotates and stuff. If you started on a map like probably Nuke, I think you'd have a lot of problems not knowing how to rotate after you lose certain map control. But with Inferno, it's quite obvious after you've played some games and you've lost some games, and you've looked at what didn't work to see what rotates maybe you should be making. And then on the T side, there's so much mid-rounding and stuff. So I do think Inferno is a really good map to start on. But again, I think as we said, I wouldn't worry about this sort of stuff very much. Just sort of practice some maps you like, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then also, give your map pool a chance, try out different maps, see what doesn't work. So I just wouldn't come in with many preconceived notions about what your map pool is going to look like before you've even tried out these maps. And for example, with Mako, you might be a sick train team. You actually played it. You just don't really know, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out.
Yeah, before you lose every train game next season. Okay, so I'm gonna have a fun question here that I've found. So, what is the weirdest call out for a map you have ever heard? And then, obviously, safe for working ones. There are some that aren't, but are there any that really spring to mind? Weirdest call out on any map you've ever heard?
There's a lot in Australia that are weird. I guess the funny one, I won't go into it, but there's some, just because I don't want to give up our secrets, but there's some funny call-outs on Vertigo for our team, because it's a brand new map. No one really knew what any call-outs were, and because we've been together since the map was really released, a lot of us, we sort of created our own call-outs. But I guess I can go into one. One of our teammates tried to, around what we call, because I don't know what everyone calls it. What we call is triple on the A site, or Tetris. We call it Tetris, where the box is and you can jump up on top, and it's in the back right corner before heaven and hell. One of our teammates tried to get 3 different spots. One called Gandalf, one called Harry, and one called Ron, and all in the 3 different areas. So just a Harry Potter reference of Harry, Gandalf, and Ron, and that was squished pretty quickly. But that was one of the funny ones that I did here because no one wanted to call it Harry, Ron, and Gandalf. So
It would just be madness in the comms where people are trying to
it
call
was.
one thing. They're like, "Where's that?" It's like,
Exactly. So we squished that pretty early, but that was pretty funny, I thought.
no, I've got two funny ones that I've heard over the years. So on Inferno, you know the cubby on Banana, you'll call it Broom. It's towards the left side
Yes.
of Banana where everyone stands in to smoke on the deep terrace molly. So I was with some Danish players, and for some reason they were calling that China, and I have no idea where this call out of fucking China came from for that part of the map. I can't believe it's come from the Chinese scene, or there's nothing that in there that represents
I don't
China.
I don't know.
Have you heard that one before?
I've never heard that one before. I remember when it was IEM Sydney, and this was, I don't know if it was the one that was just been or the year before, but anyway, it was jkaem was over, and because obviously he's in the now 100 Thieves, which was Renegades, and I was playing in a pug with him, and we're on Mirage, and so when a team is on pistols and you like to jump out of, everyone likes to do like wherever they all flood out of T apartments or out Palace, sorry. When people like to fly out Palace in Australia, it's common knowledge that we call that waterfall, like careful of the waterfall, which means all these people are going to fly out Palace. And I'm playing this pug with jkaem, and I go, "Oh, careful of waterfall, guys." And jkaem goes, "What's his waterfall?" And I go, "Oh, it's like when they all jump out apps with their pistols." And he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna call it that from now on." And then Gratification goes, welcome to AUCS, mate. And then they and believe it or not, it was an apps pop, and he got all the kills, so it was pretty funny. I love that.
Well, that is a good one. But my prize for first place for the weirdest call out I've ever heard is on Overpass. You know the divider area, right?
Yes.
Some Swedish players call this spot Jeff, like the person name Jeff.
Surely there's a player like.
Can you even imagine calling it that? And the story behind this is even more ridiculous because, do you know the player Hampus? He did in Game League, Game of Legion, and before that was it Red Reserve, maybe.
He's in NIP now, yeah.
God knows what's going on in Sweden anymore. It's all a mess.
I'm pretty sure he's in NIP. Yeah.
But anyway, I think the story is like one of his friends from like real life was playing CS with him or like Pugging or something. And then he was called Jeff, and he would only stand in divider for the whole game. So all the other Swedish players just started calling this spot Jeff. And I just remember the first time I heard it, they were calling out Jeff, and I was like, "What the heck are you talking about?" That for me is the weirdest one I've ever heard. But of course, you do get a lot of not safe for working ones.
Yeah, we've got a couple, that's for sure.
Or just every spot is just like over there in the corner, the cubby. You get that quite a lot. Okay. But another interesting question now. So I already know what you're going to answer for this one for a certainty, but we'll ask it anyway. In a team, is it good to have the threat of roster changes within your team, which is putting pressure on the players to improve, to perform better, and all these sort of things? Is it good to have, the threat of being swapped out over your head in a team when you take this one on?
I think there's people that will say yes, and there will be people that say no. So this is a very yes or no question. It's not. I don't think really you can sit in the middle in this one. You either think it's good or you think it's bad. I personally don't think it's good. I don't think threatening a certain roster change is going to certainly help someone improve as such. I think if anything, that person is going to start second guessing themselves. They'll start in turn losing confidence. So every time that they miss a shot, they think, well, that's the end of me. They're going to kick me now, or they lose a clutch, so they're going to kick me now, or they make one mistake in a game that they do 29 really good things, but they're just going to focus on that bad thing that they've done. and that in turn can have a domino effect where you lose your confidence during that game, during that match, during that official, and then in turn that could cost your team. But I personally don't think threatening to have a roster change for a certain player is good. In saying that, obviously you want to give cues and you want to say, look, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, we need to work on this. And if you don't see those things as a teammate changing, let's say such and such isn't rolling up to practice at the right time, he's always 15 minutes late, or he's always going AFK for 10 minutes during scrims, and this is affecting us because we're not being able to practice properly, it's starting to ruin chemistry in the team, then sure, then you give them this needs to change, and if it doesn't change, then that's when you need to move them on. But threatening the roster change, I personally don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think almost everyone that's been in and around good level teams for a while would feel exactly the same way. And I think it tends to be that if somebody knows they are very close to being on the chopping block, or you are looking at other options for them, I think pretty much every time it will go the direction of they think they're out the door, they'll lose interest, they'll stop trying, or they'll even get quite depressed and stuff and not play properly, and all of these sort of stuff. And I think the whole kind of topic of talking about roster changes is such a touchy topic. And I think, as you mentioned, it's the sort of thing where you have to tread a very fine line between, you point out, maybe you should improve these sort of things. If they're being late to practice, you tell them that this isn't really acceptable. You need to be here on time. And then I don't think you can ever get to the point of saying we're looking at other options, but at a certain point you do, you should run out of giving them slack and just, make the call. And I think once you pull the trigger on looking at players or openly telling other people you're looking at options, I think that's it. I think you've basically got to do it. And there's very few examples, I think, of players being on that brink and not being out of the team. So I don't know, in your playing experience, I'm sure you've had scenarios like this where it's been floated changing players, and then you get in a mess where people find out and all of this sort of thing. So have you got, I don't have to give specific examples, but have you seen this sort of thing play out before?
I guess, not that I can really recall, but I would say I'm pretty level-headed, so I'm always against that sort of thing, and I always have been. So if I've been in a situation where I've had to give advice or tell someone that they're out of the team, which I've done in the past, I don't think I've never been one to kick someone from the team. I've always been trying to work it out. So for me, it's very different. Like, not that I can recall that anything's been too bad or it's been leaked that a player's going to get removed. But yeah, nothing too bad. Obviously, we've just had a roster change in our team. I won't delve in too much, but I guess it came down to a majority of players thought that the other player wasn't fixing their mistakes, which had been discussed over a long period of time, which was fair enough. And in turn, he did get removed from the team. And I think we've now picked up a new player, and again, we've just got, we're focusing back on the basics and working with one another. And I think personally that it's, this player is slotted in really well with us, but building that chemistry now, it's something that we are working on, is building chemistry. And I think that's probably the biggest thing in CS, to be honest. I think chemistry nearly outrules anything in the whole of in the gameplay. I think chemistry is 60 to 70% of CS in higher level teams, and then the rest comes after that.
Yeah, I agree. So I do actually have an example of when this sort of thing did happen and the player did get better. So I hope I'm remembering this correctly, because it was 5 years ago now, but I'm pretty sure in the summer of 2015, the Astralis Cornell, which was TSM at the time, so this device is a Dupree, Cajun B, Carrigan, and Zipnix, they had some situation where they're fretting a roster move or something like this, and I believe what they were going to do was swap out Zipnix for AZ, and I'm sure people hearing this now will think this is absolutely insane that you'd swap out such a crucial like role player like Zipnix for someone like AZ who isn't regarded in that sort of he's not that sort of role player. But at the time, players did think more in this way. It was more about the fragging and stuff. So they saw AZ as this younger up and coming player. They tried to get him before he had played in and out of their team. So anyway, I think something happened where it came public that they were speaking to AZ, or maybe they were in contract negotiations or something. But I'm pretty sure Zipnix found out just before a really big tournament in Dubai. I don't know if you remember it, Kobe. It was called the ESL Dubai Invitational or something, the ESL one. Right at the end of it was a 200, it was a 250k tournament. I think it was a big tournament. 8 teams, best in the world went, and Zipnix played one of his best tournaments in his life at this tournament when he knew that his career was on the line, basically, because if you went out of TSM at the time, the other Danish teams they were nowhere near the same caliber as TSM, where TSM were the best team in the world just earlier in that summer. So that's probably the only example that comes to mind ever where I've heard of a case of someone being fretted, getting removed, and them playing their absolute nuts off just after.
Yeah. Well, sure, I'm sure it can work, but I think it's like you said, it's very much a rarity. You don't see it often, and very rarely will it work in that case of like you threaten this person with the removal of playing in a team where they think they're with their mates or whatever, and that it's able to turn around. I think it takes a special and a very mature person to be able to mentally work their way through that and be like, if you threaten someone that they can leave them, that could bring up something inside them that brings up resentment towards the other players in the team because they want to remove me. Like me, I'm so good. Why would they want to remove me? It's their mistakes that are bad. So when I go into practice, I'm going to point out all their mistakes and stuff like that, which is not what you want. And I think it takes a very mature and I think it's very rare to find a person that is able to take themselves out of the situation, reassess what they're doing, what they have been doing wrong, and fix that and work hard to fix those things instead of blaming others or thinking or losing confidence or losing the will to really play at that level and play with those 3 other players. I think it takes a special person.
Okay, so the next topic is all about players taking initiative or being proactive and having the space to take initiative and be proactive and all of this sort of thing. The question is, as an in-game leader or a coach, how can you help your players think and act by themselves? How can you help them take initiative? And perhaps on some maps where we talked about it earlier, where on the Mirage, Inferno, whatever, they're going to be pugging that more, so they're going to know smaller tricks and stuff. They're going to know all the nades and stuff. How do you help them on maps where perhaps they aren't as experienced, on a train maybe, or even a vertigo, where maybe they're not used to the angles or the nades and they struggle to make decisions? So from your perspective as a player, coach, or leader, any way you want to go with it, how would you help your players take more initiative? How would you set up the team for that to come about? All of these sort of things.
I think if you're struggling on certain maps, or you're not making good decisions, or you're not making decisions at all, and you feel like you're getting stuck, I think it's important to watch someone who's really good at that position at a higher level. So, for instance, I'll watch certain demos on a nuke top site because that's where I've been playing and trying to work out who plays that really well, why they play it really well, and learning their little tricks. And so I think getting your players to either sit there with them and explain it, or get being able to provide them to watch demos of certain players that are really good on their certain spots on those maps. I think that's a really good way to fast track and learn how to play a position really well, because you might be getting caught out by every time there's an execute on your bomb site and you keep getting caught out by the flashes, and then you go and watch this demo and you'll see where this person's standing and why they're standing there, and that may turn out that they're standing there due to being able to turn from certain flashes, or that be ready to throw a smoke down to stop the rush. So I think watching demos definitely is a good way to fast track your understanding of a certain way to play on a map.
Yeah, I think in terms of helping your players take more initiative, I think it is. I think the in-game leader or the coach will, however the team's set up. I think people do need to have discussions about, how much space do the players get. Particularly in the past, I've actually been. So I know some people have to rein people in. I've always been on the other side where it's more like I want the players to take more initiative. If we're calling defaults, the reason we're not explicitly saying exactly what people do is because we want to give the players the space. They're the ones that are seeing that side of the map every round when they're defaulting. They're obviously going to have the best understanding of how to default. And definitely T-side Inferno is a great example where I wouldn't, if you're an in-game leader or a coach, I'd always let the banana players call their banana stuff and let the apps players or whatever call their stuff, because they're going to see that side of the map. They're going to know what to do. So I definitely think outside of the games themselves, these conversations have to happen. People have to understand what sort of boundaries they're working with. And of course, it can go too far where players are just not playing into the strat or whatever, and they're just dying without telling the in-game leader what they were going to run. So I don't know if you've had this in your experience where maybe you've had to have these conversations or rein players in, perhaps, even if they're going too far. So I don't know if you've had these sort of experiences in the past with this sort of stuff.
I think I was a prime example when I was younger. I used to get reined in a lot. I was very much a Puggy player, and this is obviously when I first went pro in CS:GO again. I was very like I obviously I'm not up to his standard, but I felt like I was the Stewie 2K of Australia back in that scene where I would always be inside smokes. I'd always, push random things all by myself and make a lot of solo plays and just make it work. And I remember my team would always try and rein it in. And then, you know, I remember, and then what we called a nationals we called a Nats in Australia, which is pretty much our main competition, and we'd have at least one or two every year. And my IGL was literally just like, Zertz, just go and do whatever you want, try and win us around. And and so I did. I just ran off and did my own thing and won us around. And it was just one of those things where, yeah, I've constantly been that player that was reined in because I wanted to make too many solo plays. But yeah, like you said, defaults are for letting you players on T side take that map control and try and work out where the CTs are playing and feed that information to your in-game leader and let him decide where you want to go. But I think your job on a default as a T side player usually is just hunt for info. So let your IGL know what utility is being used. There may have been two Molotovs used over your side of the map or two smokes used early, and then that will let your IGL know that that this side of the map has a lacking of utility, and if we did a full execute, they're not going to have much, if anything, to stop it getting in. So I think that's very important. Pretty much your role is to go out, hunt information, numbers of players, or the utility that's being used, or any sound cues of where players could be playing, and giving that to your in-game leader, and then letting him work off that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the importance of letting players have space take their own initiative, I think at the pro level, I think we've actually gone in waves where I think at the start of the game it was much more puggy, and then towards maybe 2016, 17, 18, the game went much more execute heavy and much more structured and reined in as people understood how to use their nades correctly, how to properly run explosive executes and stuff. And I think over the last 2 years, it's been a lot about letting players have more space, take their own initiative to, if they spot a gap and they're playing T side and they know there's only one player and they can finish them off, they should have the space to call flash me and I'm going to kill them, and then tear open the bomb site. So I don't know in your experience if you've actually felt like potentially over the years you've had to take more initiative as a player, or you'd have to give players more initiative. From like a playing perspective, have you found that this kind of dynamic has switched and now you need to give players a lot of space?
Yeah. Oh, obviously it's changed for sure. I think making solo plays, I don't think it's something that you should do every single round. You don't want to be making a play every single round by yourself and being that player. But obviously giving your players the freedom when they do spot that gap, like you say, calling it a gap, in how the CTs are playing or a sound cue, and at least taking that educated guess or educated risk that they can get in and gain a certain amount of map control or gain a kill, which could open up a bomb site for sure. You want to be able to give your players that sort of freedom, but within reason. So obviously you don't want this same player. Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this every second round. You want to do it when you spot a gap or that you've noticed something. So you may have noticed something in round 3, and then you've heard the same thing in round 5, and you're like, I know what they're doing here. I'm going to make this play. And then obviously it's up to your IGL, but I think giving players the freedom to make those moves is definitely good. A good thing to do and a good thing to be able to do as an IGL, and not be extremely dictatorial in that sense of where it's your word and your word only, for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams actually have that problem. I know that particularly in Europe, at the kind of advanced levels, this is just on the borderline of semi-pro or just below it. There are a lot of teams that are ran by experienced in-game leaders or players that have been around a long time, and they have a super strict structure because their game knowledge is so much better than they're playing with. Like, they're bringing in young, puggy players that haven't been around so long, so they just lock them in. You're going to run these strats exactly how I want them ran. I've heard actually quite a lot of stories about this sort of thing happening at that sort of level, and it's always a disaster, and they can never beat better teams because the players aren't in that frame of mind where they're used to. You have to practice this sort of thing as we're talking about reading the other team and trying to exploit gaps. You're not just gonna appear in a game and know exactly what to do. You have to try stuff out in the scrims. You have to see what works, what doesn't work when you can exploit a gap. So you have to get in this rhythm early of giving players space. And I feel like communication is a really big part of taking initiative and stuff. It's so important that you actually communicate if you are going to try and exploit a gap or you think there is a gap, and talk to your teammates. So I don't know if you found that it helps a lot with having great comms with these sort of things and players being able to take initiative because they're getting more information, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, feeding information to your in-game leader. That's the most important thing on T side, because once you do that, then he's able to set up and tell everyone else where they need to finish, whether that what bomb site that you are exploiting or. So I think it's making sure communications is high in what you're doing is definitely important, and letting your IGL know. But while you're doing that, you're obviously letting the people around you know what's happening, and they should have an understanding, at least a slight understanding of if you're working this side of the map, then it's probably a good idea that they either fall back from where they were originally going to aggress, or possibly get closer to you so they can then either trade or explode off what could potentially be a kill in the round and opening up a bomb site.
So the next topic is going to be a really tricky one to answer. I've had to think a bit about how I'm going to even approach this one. But on either side, CT or terrorist side, when should you play more default, and when should you throw in your special setups, your special tactics, your your unorthodox stuff, your stuff that's maybe a bit gimmicky, but not the standard stuff you're going to run, a special set strat you have and things like this. And I think teams at lower levels struggle with this so much where they don't have the balance down at all. And I think it's very, very situational, all of this sort of stuff. So in your experience, I'm sure you've played on teams that were execute heavy, were default heavy, in the middle. What advice would you give to these people that aren't sure what they should be calling in their own games, when they should be playing default and they should be throwing, the curveballs in? Or what would you say to them?
Like, I guess really the only person, in my opinion, especially on CT sides, because usually that's where you're going to see mainly a lot of your gimmicky setups, as you would call them. You don't sort of see the gimmicky stuff so much on T side unless you're doing an execute. And I wouldn't call executes really gimmicky. There's not really any gimmicky executes unless you maybe double run boosting into a certain site. I guess that's gimmicky, which I'm sure I've seen in the past. But on your CT sides, you want to be letting your AWPer be that person, being the push and pull player, of doing different certain setups or going for certain picks. He's usually the one that you want to see getting aggressive, adapting, changing where he is, possibly goes for a pick on one side of the map at the start of the round. And as soon as he goes for that pick and he's seen, he'll move the AWP over to the other side of the map and switch with another player. those certain things, I think, is really the only person who should be going for these, especially early days, is going for these gimmicky setups and plays. But yeah, it's a really tough one, isn't it? Maybe if things aren't really working for you early doors in your CT setup, and you have played standard for your first 5 rounds, and let's say your first 5 or 6 rounds you've lost, and your first couple of really good buy rounds you've played your normal default, and it really hasn't worked, then maybe it's time. Okay, let's switch something up. Let's possibly play into I keep referring to Inferno, but like you said, it's a really good map to focus on these sort of things. But let's it hasn't worked over the board. They've been able to take A off us. Let's get really aggressive into apartments. They've been trying to take apartments off us. Let's play 3 in apartments. Let's play an AWP and a halls. We're going to play 1 in boiler, and we're going to play 1 watching, Lightroom close with the AWPer. And play like that's, I guess, a gimmicky setup as such, but really it is a counter to how the other team's playing. But I think that's probably a good time to start bringing those ones out, is when you're starting to, you're losing map control too easy, and it's just not working for you. I guess maybe that's a good way of doing it. I'm not too sure. It's a hard one.
Yeah, I think so the person that asked this question was asking it from the perspective of they really struggle to adapt. So they presumably they go into the games and then they just fall into playing the same setups every single round. I'm guessing mainly on CT side he was talking about here, where they just sit in the standard stuff and it's not working. So definitely, as you mentioned, if you are just losing every single round, you've got to change something. You can't keep trying to force, your round peg into the square hole. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
So in a match, definitely, sometimes you do need to come out playing standard, and maybe gimmicky is the wrong word. There's certainly setups which won't work against certain stuff. So it is a risk. Maybe risky setups is the better word for it. Where you throw in, I don't know, a specific take of map control that would be countered by something, but you're going to risk it because your standard banana takes aren't doing anything. So you're going to run a fast take and you're going to risk it, try and get something done. But I think this whole thing touches on such a big topic of how do you actually adjust mid game? How do you make changes mid game? And I think at lower levels, people even up to pretty good levels, people struggle on this so much, on how to actually adapt, and they just stay default and they just lose the game because they haven't changed anything. So I feel like you need to be always trying to read the other team and trying to make small adjustments. There's always, at high levels, players are much more used to making small adjustments from what they see the other team doing. So if certain players running always this pathing, or they're always using these nades, players at high levels are very, very quick just to adjust. But even from a team sense, you need to keep all this sort of stuff in mind, trying to read the other team. How are they playing? How should we play against them? And I think people get stuck in the mindset a lot when they're under pressure of not, you're just not playing to lose, if that makes sense. You're not risking anything, and that's the wrong way to go about things. You need to take risks in some sense. You have to play to win. So in your experience, and I'm sure I've actually sat in coaching you guys in officials where this sort of thing has happened, where you've just fallen into playing very default in big pressure games. And I don't know if you found this sort of thing where you've struggled to be proactive, to take risks. Is this something that you struggled with? Have you got any recommended remedies for the people out there on this sort of stuff?
100%. I agree. When we have fallen into it, where many a time where we're, I guess, well, you would know when we versed Skyfire on Inferno, and we were up, gosh, quite a few rounds on our Inferno, and I think it was 15-11, 15-12 or something like that. Anyway, and they ended up bringing it back 15-15, and then winning, and then ended up winning the map out. And the reason we couldn't get over the line is because we were playing too scared, and we were too afraid to lose than we were trying to win the game. So yeah, it's something that we had to overcome, and I think we're actually slowly getting better at that, for sure. I think a thing that comes with that is being confident in your own abilities as a team, and having a good understanding as a team what one another can do. But yeah, it is a tough one. It's more a mentality than it is anything to do, with your skill level. it really is just a mentality, making sure you're not focusing on losing the game and really focused on actually being able to win the game, trying to win it instead of not losing it. Yeah.
Yeah. This it's not limited to lower levels. Even at the pro level, you have this sort of thing. So I actually remember after I was in Katowice for the major in 2019, and after Astralis won that major, they did a big they did a press conference first, and then they went backstage for some weird. Who was it with? It was like some weird like company that does like auxiliary content. Grabbed Device and Glaive off, and they sat them on this sofa to watch back their final against Ents. I don't know if you remember the game Kobe, where where Ents made the final. But
yes, I do.
But anyway, they were sat through this game and they were watching it back, and they had like a regular, I can't remember who it was hosting it, but like basically like a desk host saying, "What do you think about this round?" And they sat for a few rounds, and Device was talking about how it's really easy to play with momentum. And this is a word that I hate. For a long time in CS, it's misused a lot of the time. And I think Device actually he didn't really explain what he meant. So what Device meant when he meant playing with momentum, and it's really easy to call with momentum, is that when you're the winning team and you're beating the other team and you can see they're trying something and it's not working, you know for a fact they're not going to run that again. So if you're playing CT Mirage and you get B rushed and you crush them, you survive with 4, they are not calling a B rush in the next round. So going into the following round, you can play solo B, you can fast cat jump someone, you can play 4A early because they're not rushing B. At least at the pro level, lower levels, this stuff even probably still holds at all levels in terms of that sort of stuff. And beating out that sort of mind game on the opposing when you're losing is really hard. And I think only teams in the last year at the pro level has learned how to do it. So I remember I was watching a game of EG. I can't remember what tournament it was at, but it was a seriously high level game. And every time they lost a round to something, they would assume the other team's not going to run that again, which sounds a bit weird, but it's quite logical because who on the T side, if you win a round, is going to call the same round again?
Yeah.
So this was the first time. I think all teams are starting to understand it now, but at the pro level, they're starting to get a much better understanding of how do you play from behind. And again, these sort of things, you've got to take risks. You can't, if you lose to a B rush, you can't play 4B in the next gun round and just sacrifice it. You have to mid push. You have to play numbers A early because they're probably going to go A this round. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this topic. And even at the pro level, this actually is fairly new. This sort of way of thinking and playing when you're losing and all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, when I was IGLing, I'd run strategies twice in a row. Sometimes even when we lost it, thinking that they're not going to play counter. I was famous for, well, I would say famous. It's not really famous, but I was well known for on Inferno. Our pistol strat would be all 5 of us go fast through mid into jungle into CT spawn to B. All right, that would be our pistol round. Then our second round would be fast mid into jungle into CT spawn into B. And then guess what our third round would be? Fast mid into jungle into CT spawn into B. And honestly, it had a very high success rate because no one expects you to run the same thing 3 times in a row. And I remember doing it in an official. This was quite a while ago. I think I ran it for like the first 4 or 5 rounds of the game because it worked. And the theory was, look, they're not going to expect it again. They're not going to expect it again. And then I'm pretty sure we ran the 6th time we tried to run it, we ran into 5 guys with pistols sitting in jungle, and we all died. And I was like, well, there it goes. That's enough of that. But honestly, yeah, it can happen, and that can be a good strategy to use every once in a while, and because everyone is trying to think how can we best counter this next play. So it can work, but again, it's not something I think you should be focusing on too much.
Yeah, so it's only actually, I think at lower levels people will just instantly play into if they get vent dived or nuke next round, there's 4 nades nades land. Yes. Then it's only at the pro level where the mind games go up a level big time and people are really thinking about this sort of stuff. So maybe not so useful for low level people, but it's something to bear in mind, especially as you say on T side. You can call the same strat twice if it does help
sure.
if you know the other team and how they're going to react as well.
Yeah,
Rather than playing just some random guys where they might do anything.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So I think, Kobe, we'll do the final question of the night, and this is going to be a good one for you. How as a player, do you balance either school and playing, working and playing, all of these sort of things? How do you get a good work-life balance? And then from a leader or coach's perspective, how do you know if you're putting enough pressure on people to play enough? Maybe you're playing too little when your people have free time. I think this is a big question for a lot of people when they're obviously, if you're not playing at a top level, you're not getting salaried, so you've got to be doing something on the side. So I don't know if in your experiences you found, maybe you personally, how would you go about balancing? Have you seen other people approach this sort of thing?
Yeah, well, this one's tough because in Australia, obviously, we're not like NA and we're not like Europe. We don't have the same amount of funding, the same amount of large organizations that can help us out financially while we want to play the game. So if you listen to a lot of like what Sponge used to say when he was in the early stages of Vox Seminole, he was right. He was working as a full-time electrician, I think it was, or a plumber. And then he would come home and he would play, and he was at the top of Australian CS. And I think 2 or 3 of those Vox guys had full-time jobs while they were trying to play, and this is while they're traveling and playing. And so in Australia, yeah, we're not funded. So what we have to do is we don't get that balance. We actually don't get to decide that this is our job, and then we have to sit down and we get to play games for a living. It's just something that we don't get to do. It's a genuine hobby for 99% of Australian players in the scene, and that's probably over all games. You can throw in other games underneath the Counter-Strike banner as well. But to be able to get a work-life balance, it's not that easy if you really want to make it to the top level in AUCS. You've either got to be extremely talented to be able to go do whatever you want to do on weekends and weekdays, and then jump on and have a very, very good understanding of the game, and also have that ability to be sharp. I will say Australian CS, we have extremely sharp individuals in this scene. Like, they hit some nut shots all the time, but it's probably that ability of the strategy and those sort of things that let us down internationally, obviously, because we're not exposed to the likes of Europe and NA, where they have a broader range of extremely good teams that they can practice and play against, and learn and develop and always play. So, for instance, tonight we probably played 2 reasonably quality sides that we would say like that are decent, and then one of those scrims is like against a team that, to be honest, they're brand new, and it wasn't. We got nothing out of it, really. We could go back and watch that demo, but we're playing against a team that's pugging. So would we rather take that hour back and go back and watch demos? Probably, but we can't. You can't do that. And we feel like we only get to prac. We only scrim 3 hours a night, so we have our 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and 9 o'clock scrims. We do a recap from obviously 10 o'clock, and that lasts for about 10 or 15 minutes. And before practice, before that 7, usually we start at 6:30, because that's when some people finish work or finish dinner and stuff like that, where they're able to sit down and get ready to practice, and the rest of it's left up to the individual to warm up. So obviously with COVID-19 out and about at the moment, especially in my state in Victoria, Australia, we're in heavy lockdown. So no one's allowed to move around. You're not allowed to pretty much leave your house. So myself and Jimmy, who's on my team, we're got luxury of staying at home at the moment and no work. But the other guys, they have to go and day to day do their jobs, and then come home and play till 10 o'clock at night, after waking up at probably 6 or 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work. It can't be too fun, which obviously I've done in the past, and hopefully when all this stuff settles down, I'll go back to having a job. But it's very hard. I don't know how to say you can balance it, but obviously make sure you do spend time with your friends and your family when you can. And I will say on weekends, your Fridays and your Saturdays, and all through the Sunday during the day. Do that. And I will say also, we actually don't look too heavily into our Sunday practices. So we'll practice, but if it's not a great night, we'll never be down on ourselves, or we'll never be too upset with the night, even if we've lost, because we know we're taking a large amount of time out of our life, which is over the weekend, over those 2 or 3 days that we haven't touched Counter Strike. We're not around one another. We're not playing Counter Strike as much, so we never really read too much into our Sundays. So I guess that's maybe a thing you can take into it, is like, on a Sunday night, if you're underperforming, don't be too harsh on your team, or don't be too harsh on yourself that you haven't played the way that you want to, or you haven't got the scrim results that you want to do. Or if you've got an official on a Sunday, obviously do what you can do to win it, but just don't get too down on yourself on maybe that day. And yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, spend time with your family and friends on your Sundays. It's the best way to have a good balance.
Yeah, so I think from like with a leader or a coaching perspective, when it comes to picking your scrim times and stuff like this, I mean the first thing is you have to be reasonable with your expectations. So many times I've seen teams that practice super hard when they first come together, and well, normally for these teams when people are younger, so they're still at school and stuff. So maybe in that sense they can afford to spend a bit more time playing. But the same thing happens every single time. They burn out, or people hate playing so much, and it's just a complete mess, and the team falls in half. So I think the first thing is to definitely set reasonable expectations. Talk to your players, see how much they want to play. I think when you get to high levels, there's kind of an expectation that you just play most weekday nights, pretty much. And then once you get to high level, when you start getting salary, then it's just like, okay, you're probably not going to have a day job as well, so we'll just move that practice slot a bit earlier. So that sort of figures itself out. But definitely for lower levels, talk to people, see what they can do. And something I would recommend actually for people that haven't played so much in teams, they're playing in lower level teams, I would actually practice less than you want to at first. I would only practice. So if you think you could practice 5 days a week, practice 3 at first and see how it goes. Because I think very quickly you'll find that everyone's motivation drops off a cliff. When you form a new team, everyone's super sky high with their motivation levels. They want to get back to teaming and stuff, and then it just plateaus a bit and it goes back to a more sustainable level. And I've seen so many times where people practice too much. So I think, definitely set reasonable expectations. Don't practice too much at first. And I think if you're approaching your scrims properly, you're getting good value scrims, you don't have to play that much. I think people will be surprised how little you could actually get away with scrimming if you really were coming into them thinking the right things and really getting good value with all the stuff we said earlier of not playing to win, and having a set ideas of what you're going to practice, having good comms and stuff. So I don't know what you found from your perspective, maybe in teams where you haven't played scrimmed as much. Have you actually ever been in a scenario where you've scrimmed too much, for example, or people have burnt out and stuff? Have you ever been in that sort of environment?
Yeah. So even in this team, like I said, we only do 7, 8, 9. We really probably could squeeze in to play 6, and we probably could squeeze in to play till 10 to 11. But we found when we've done that in the past, in this team in particular, that the last scrim's usually a waste, is because we're either burnt out, or we're tired, or we're not getting the value out of that game. Even if we're winning it, or we're losing it, or whatever, usually, what's the best way of describing it? It's like, sometimes possibly you will invite your friend over on the weekend for a sleepover, and one night on a Friday, and then the next day you wake up and he asks his parents, "Can he sleep over again?" Okay, that's fine. And then he sleeps on the Saturday night again, and then you're with him for 3 days straight, and then by the end of that third day you want to kill him. It's a little bit like I use that sometimes when playing with your teammates in other games as well, but I won't go into that. I think it can get a little bit like that if you're playing too much CS with one another, and that's why we steer clear of playing, starting scrims at 6 and finishing at 11. I think it's too much. I think you don't get the quality, because by the last map you're so mentally fatigued, and you can be stepping on one another's shoes, so you're possibly more likely to have a stupid argument over a nothing round than getting 3 quality scrims and you're actually everyone being reasonable for 3 scrims and no one stepping on anyone's toes. So yeah, I think that there is a big thing that it can be too much. And I think if you ask a lot of pro teams as well, so you go up to like, you talk to your Astralis and stuff like that, they'll tell you the same thing, that they would have had practice days where by the end of it, they're so tired that they've just wanted to kill kill everyone in the room, and they're overplaying because it's too much.
I just have some image of you wanting to like murder Jimmy after scrims.
Oh, mate. I love Jimmy. I'm too nice. Jimmy's nice, but do you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
Some people can step on other people's shoes, I guess.
Yeah, I think this does touch on a bigger topic. Well, not necessarily a bigger topic, but a topic of how many scrims you actually book in a row and stuff. And I'm always in the boat of less is more. I actually think 2 in a row is actually the optimum amount. I know for you guys in Mako, it does make sense to play 3 just because that's just how much time you have. You couldn't take a break in the middle because it'd be too late. But I do think 2 in a row is actually the optimum. And particularly, again, in maybe EU Advanced or probably be low-end MDL, NA, or low-end, probably I imagine some Australian teams are the same, where they'll just play 6 scrims in a row. And by the 4th scrim, nobody wants to be there. Everyone's pugging. You're not learning anything. I've heard horror stories about this all the time in Europe and Advanced. So many of those teams just play 6-7 scrims in a row, completely burnt out. Have you actually heard of any teams in Australia just playing ridiculous amounts of scrims, at least recently?
Not that I can think of recently playing ridiculous scrims. Obviously, like when I'm looking to play scrims, I'm seeing teams look for scrims from starting at 6 o'clock, and those scrims will finish at 11, and I'm just like, wow. And some of these guys are doing that in like the 5 nights, and then, like you said, some of them are newer teams, and you're just like, this is just, I feel like they're going to burn out and die, which they usually do. Those teams usually don't last last the distance, and I think playing that much could start to kill chemistry. Like I said, chemistry, I don't think we went into it that much, but I think as a team, and I'll say this, if you're starting a new team, I think what you really want to do is focus on your team chemistry. You'll want to be best mates. You want to be super positive with one another, and you want to try and, I know that what we call in Australia and probably overseas as well is banter in brackets that we'll say in banter, and that can go one way or the other. And a lot of the times banter can be negative, to put another person down, and it's sort of a thing we try in our team to focus on, is there's not too much banter. And I think, like, obviously there is in any team, because we're human and we're having chats and we're laughing and we're joking around, but I think the best way for us to build chemistry, and it's been a big backbone of when I was an in-game leader, and I guess I still am some sort of a leader in our team because I'm a lot older and more mature, is we try and push our team and everyone's mindset to be a lot more positive. We want to be talking one another up, and always backing one another in, and making sure we're telling each other when we've done really well, and we make a thing of that. So I guess, for new teams coming through, focus on your chemistry, build that up. In my opinion, I would say focus on positivity, and letting your teammate know when they do really well. And I think it's very important. And what I will say is a player in our team called Callum. He came to the realization when I joined the team about how positive I was, but he came to the realization how important it is to recognize when someone gives you a compliment. So if someone says, "Nice round, man," like, "Well done," instead of being silent and just thinking, "Yeah, I'm the man," it's very important for that person to go, "Thanks," like, cheers. That's like, feeding back and making them feel good that they're giving you a compliment. And that, again, just builds that, again, in another sense to what's like you said, Device was saying, helping build momentum. You'll feel it in competitive gameplay when you've won some rounds in a row, and that that positive reinforcement is flowing through you guys, and it is like a force of momentum. You're feeling good about yourself, and you're feeling so good that you're gonna, in an instance, make that next play, which will be the right play, and you end up, it's that momentum thing. And I think, it can help out. So focus on your chemistry and build a team around that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard of stories about super toxic team environments and stuff. Certainly been times where I've heard like voice clips of people playing in these teams, and I don't even understand how they play the game with when they're just screaming at each other and stuff like between the rounds. I don't understand how a team could function in that environment, and definitely all this sort of stuff of remaining positive, just doing stuff like saying you could, like the power of just saying nice try. People don't actually think about it so much, but just the power of saying that after, even if somebody, balls is up in a clutch, just say nice try, move on, and get on with it. Rather than
we say bad luck.
Yeah,
a lot of the time.
whatever.
Like you obviously you'll hear us, and like the same thing is out in our team is like bad luck, man. It's like good effort, nice try. Like you're right. We say all that all the time. Even when someone's like completely shit the bed in a clutch, which can if you're playing as often as everyone does, it happens nightly. Someone will shit the bed, so to speak. But it is important to just be like, doesn't matter, move on, next round. And in any sporting term, any coach or any player at a high level will tell you that it's very important to mentally reset and move on from what happened, because you're not able to clearly think about what's ahead if you're still worrying about what happened last round or just before. So yeah, definitely is a good thing to do.
Yeah, I actually, for some reason, I find that the higher pressure the match I'm coaching, the more calm I am. I don't know why it is. And I just find myself saying, like, stay calm, guys, let's chill out. I remember I was playing a LAN semi-final. Actually, it was in the LAN final. And we were, like, up big on the first map, and the other team actually beat us in overtime. But I remember when we were losing, like, the last stages of regulation, that's one of the calmest I've ever been in coach. And I just spent the whole time repeatedly saying, stay calm, and like, somebody made a mistake, say, forget about it, it's all good, bad luck or whatever, nice try, and just move on. And I think that it's an underrated part of the game, actually. It's something that I'm sure a lot of newer players don't even think about it. They just think about where their crosshair's pointing a lot of the time. But well, all of this.
It's definitely a sport now. It's not it's not a game. Like, well, it sounds stupid. That sounds like a stupid comment, because it is a game, but it's more of a sport now than it ever was, and it's not just it's not something just to do on the weekend now. It is a genuine sport, and obviously a really good what's really good to listen to is if you go back and some of the content that like Astralis is releasing now is like really cool to listen to how those players think about it and how they go about their games. And just like if you go back and just listen to what like Dupree and Device and that stuff say, they're just, it's just another level. And I think that's just what if you want to help really improve and get a good understanding of how the game works now, you go and listen to those guys. It's really good.
Well, I think this has gone on longer than I already planned, Kobe. I think we'll wrap it up in a few seconds. So make sure you go and follow this beautiful man. It'll be a still picture on your screen on Twitter. I think his Twitter will be below his head. I hope. As long as it's edited up correctly. I hope. So, yep. Comment any questions you have for the next time at the bottom of the video. All the standard stuff. Go and follow this man. Retweet all his stuff. I don't know. Go and add him on Steam. Spam his Steam. Go and do that.
No, thank you.
Ask him to sign your profile.
You can send me some skins. I'm lacking in that department. That's the thing I am lacking in at the moment. So if you want to send across any of your skins, I'm happy to accept those.
Yeah. So any final words, shouting out the org? I don't know. Anything like that you want to do?
Yeah, no. Well, cheers to yourself. Thank you for having me on for the first one. Obviously, a bit of a trial run with myself. Not any of the high profile as some of the other boys I can imagine you're going to be getting on very soon, boys and girls. But thanks for having me on. And obviously, I will give a quick shout out to our organisation, Mako. Really good bunch of guys, and absolutely love playing under them. And a shout out to all my teammates. I love you guys, and and I'll see you in TS, I guess.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the next one.